In this video, I'm gonna compare the Panasonic Leica 100-400 and 50-200mm telephoto zoom lenses, and I'm gonna find out which one is the better of the two. These two are the finest, the long telephoto zoom lenses in the Lumix Micro Four Thirds lineup. And these two lenses are often the two options when you're looking to buy a long telephoto zoom lens. And if you don't have much experience with long telephoto lenses, it can be difficult to decide or know which one offers the suitable range and enough reach for your purposes. But in this video, I'm gonna have the answer for you. And I'm going to start by comparing the build quality and the features. And the build quality is essentially the same on both lenses, which is very good. And both are also weather sealed. So in that regard, both lenses are exactly the same. However, this 100-400 has three features that the 50-200 doesn't have. And those features are the zoom lock, the focus limiter, and the tripod collar. However, I have to say that the 50-200 doesn't really need any of those, but I'm still gonna give 1 point to the 100-400 because it has more useful features. And next I'm gonna compare the size and the weight. And even if you look at these lenses, it's quite obvious that the 50-200 is the smaller of the two, but neither lens is exactly a huge lens. The filter size on the 100-400 is 72mm, and on the 50-200 it's 67mm. And the 50-200 weighs just over 700 grams, and the 100-400 weighs just barely over 1 kilogram. And in this category, I'm gonna give 1 point to the 50-200 because it's smaller and lighter. And next, let's compare the zoom range and reach. Both of these lenses are in so-called super telephoto category if you think about the angle of view. Both have the same 4 times zoom range from 50-200 and from 100-400. But what comes to the reach, then the 100-400 is the winner. The reach of this lens is almost ridiculous, and the angle of view at 400mm equals to 800mm in full frame terms. And it's almost, like I said, ridiculous how much reach you have in this lens, and therefore I'm gonna give 1 point to the 100-400 in this category because of the enormous reach. And next, let's compare the close-up capabilities of these lenses. You can't really talk about macro because neither lens is a true macro, but both offer really nice close-up capabilities. The minimum focusing distance on the 50-200 is 75 centimeters, and the minimum focusing distance on the 100-400 is 1.3 meters. However, the maximum reproduction ratio is exactly the same, 0.25 on both lenses. So in that regard, these lenses are exactly the same. And because of the relatively long focal length, these are ideal for some buck pictures or something like that, where it's good to have some distance between your lens and the subject, because bugs are easily scared or scary, and they can just fly away if you go too close. But I'm gonna give both lenses 1 point here because the minimum focusing or the maximum reproduction ratio is the same on both lenses. And next, let's look at the sharpness. I'm gonna start with the 100-400. This lens is really good for such an extreme super telephoto lens, and you should get sharp results throughout the zoom range. No problem there. However, this 50-200 is even better. This lens is super sharp throughout the zoom range and at all apertures. And it's the better of the two in this category. However, I have to say that you have to do some pixel peeping in order to see the differences between these two lenses. But I have to give a point to the 50-200 in this category because this is the sharper lens. And so far the score is even. Both lenses have 3 points. So I guess we have to dig a bit deeper to find out which lens is the better lens. And by the way, if you find this comparison helpful, please buy me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below. That would mean a lot to me, and it also helps me to make more of these videos for you. And now let's look at the practicality of these lenses. This 100-400 is an awesome super telephoto lens. But I also think this is a special purpose lens. The focal length range or the reach is so extreme that this is just not suitable for many kinds of situations. Because it starts from 100mm, which is simply too long for many normal shooting situations. But if you are into wildlife or bird photography, then this is the lens. Because especially if you shoot birds, they are typically, far away and relatively small. So you need all that reach, that 400mm, to be able to fill the frame. However, this 50-200mm is very suitable for all kinds of telephoto zoom photography. The range starts at 50mm, which is suitable for even studio portraits or portraits in general, but that 200mm is enough for some kind of bird photography as well. You just have to be, of course, a bit closer than with a 400mm. And this is also compact enough to carry around easily, and this doesn't draw that much attention either because it's nice and compact. And this one also has faster maximum aperture throughout the range. It's not a huge difference, but in some situations it can mean a lot. And this is also compatible with 2 teleconverters, 1.4 and 2 times teleconverters. And especially that 2 times converter is very interesting because it transforms this to a 100-400 with a maximum aperture from 5.6 to f8. So if you only occasionally need 400mm, then the teleconverter combined with this lens might be the right solution for you. I have no experience with those teleconverters, but what I have read, I understand the optical quality doesn't suffer too much with those converters. So that's something to consider. You would still have a very compact and sharp 50-200, but then if you mount the converter between your lens and the camera, you will get that 400mm for some occasional use. So in the practicality category, I'm gonna give 1 point to the 50-200 because in my opinion, it is much more practical than the 100-400. And then let's look at the price, which varies of course a lot depending on your location. But it looks like the 50-200 is about 100 euros or US dollars cheaper than the 100-400. So I'm gonna give one more point to the 50-200 because it's more affordable. Okay, right now the points look like this, and the 50-200 is a clear winner here because it's so much more practical than the 100-400mm lens. But remember, this is only my opinion, and if you are a bird shooter or a wildlife shooter, you will probably choose the 100-400 anyway, regardless of what I think. And of course, this is probably the right choice for that kind of photography. But this 50-200mm is just so much more practical for all kinds of general telephoto shooting that it wins this comparison. And then of course there's one more option, and that's the Lumix 70-300mm, which falls right in between these two lenses when it comes to the focal length range. I have not used that lens, but the general opinion seems to be that it's a pretty decent lens. It's also weather sealed, it's dual IS capable, and it's a lot more affordable than either of these two lenses. So that's one good option to consider, especially if you are on a tight budget. I hope you enjoyed this comparison. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.